Not a lot of Marvel, not a lot of DC, but we have some great independent comic books to talk about on this week's episode of After the Poll. Hey, all my webheads out there, welcome back to Comic Book Corner 2.0. And fans, I am your host, Mike Spiderslayer, always helping you make decisions on what comic books to buy. And today, guys, I'm bringing in an episode of After the Poll. That's right, fans, this is the video series where each week I take some of my most anticipated comic books that I'm looking forward to reading and seeing if they live up to that hype. And hopefully, if you haven't gotten in the comic book shop yet, this helps you make a decision on what comic books to buy. So guys, before we get started this week, if you want to go ahead and hit that join button right there on my home screen, it definitely does help support the channel. It gives you, the viewers, some extra perks like super chats, some stickers on your comments, early releases on videos. Guys, it's pretty cool. So of course, guys, thank you as always for your support on the channel, and let's get started with this week's episode of After the Poll. Alright guys, so just a little warning, there are spoilers in this video, so if you have not read your comic books, read your comic books, then come back and watch this show. Also, this week's episode is longer. I am covering 10 comic books this week due to the pure reason that some of these books were quick reads. Now, does that make them bad comic books? Well, we'll soon find out, right? All right, so the first book that we're going to be talking about today is Robert Kirkman's Firepower. That's right, guys. Now, this book has always been a pretty good book. Sometimes it's a really quick read and the story progression takes forever to happen. But this issue, things really start to heat up, and that's no pun intended here, right? But here we get to see Sam Nee's artwork, front stage and center here. This is that statue that's by the leader of the Earthscorch clan called Shaw. It actually comes back to life in this issue, which was kind of cool. And you got this serpent omen thing that takes over all the warriors, and there's just great artwork in here, and it's just a lot of fun to look at. There's just lots of action, just an overall great comic book. So what could you expect in this issue, in issue 17? Well, you can expect a lot of fighting, right? Like I said, you wind up getting to see this Earthscorch clan leader by the name of Shaw come to life, and you find out that he's ultra powerful, and you wind up finding out that Owen Johnson, who's the main character, his wife Kelly, they're no match for these cast of characters, right? And so they light everything on fire, they basically destroy everything, and that's really all that happens in this book. There's, again, not a lot of story progression when it comes to firepower, but at the end you wind up seeing the family meet up with Owen Johnson and Kelly, which was kind of cool. It was like right place, right time type of thing where the family meets up with them. So it was an okay issue. I mean, if you want action, yeah, that's what you got out of this. This was a quick read. There wasn't very much that went into this comic book, but it was cool to see. Now, the one funny thing, now that I'm reading this book, is I watched the entire season of Squid Games, and the old man, the sensei, like, he reminds me of the old man in Squid Game. So now every time I hear him speak in the comic book, he's right here too. Like, that's the voice that I have in my head of him. So yeah, that's what I thought of it. But if you read Firepower, it's not going to take you longer than what it took me to review this comic book. But I definitely still recommend this book. It's a great read. Book number 2 that we're talking about today is Primordial. This is issue 2, done by Jeff Lemire, Andrea Sorrentino. Andrea Sorrentino's artwork is so gorgeous for this book, and I really enjoyed it because you got to see it in the eyes of a little Jack Russell Terrier. I think his name is Lakea or whatnot, but he's this little Russian dog. And just check out the artwork, man. It just like, it mesmerizes you. It gets you into this weird, into this world of this dog, right? Which I thought was just so interesting. And you learn in this book about where this dog came from, how he wound up going into space to begin with, right? And again, you just can't help but feel for this dog, this journey that this little Jack Russell has gone through. And you got introduced to the scientist that actually took care of the little dog before it wound up going into space. And as the issue progresses, you wind up seeing the doctor that wound up getting recruited to go above and beyond to find out what happened to the animals in space once they got lost or were considered dead. You wind up seeing the doctor winds up meeting with the person that took care of the dog. So I thought that was quite interesting. Now, again, this is another book where it took you less time to read it than Firepower. It literally took me maybe a minute and 30 seconds to go through this book. It's pretty much almost a silent issue. It's just in the eyes of the dog, but you get mesmerized by the artwork. Sorrentino just does an awesome job with it. And again, I say this when it comes to stray dogs, I'm just a sucker when it comes to animals and seeing their point of view of things or learning about their stories. It's just quite interesting to me. So I'm really looking forward now how the story is going to progress going forward. And I'm on board with this one. Book number 3 that we're talking about is one of 2, I think, DC books that are in this pile today, and that is Batman Fear State. This is issue 116. Now, I know a lot of you are kind of feeling the same way I am. It's kind of like, what's the point of Fear State? Obviously, because Tynion is leaving. We want Joshua Williamson to come. We want the new story to go forward, right? It was kind of the same thing that we were experiencing with Tom King. We're like, dude, when is this story going to end? And once he was, set to leave, we were like, oh, I can't wait for Tynion to come in. And so now when it comes to Fear State, this is the penultimate issue when it comes to the event. This is almost done. Things are beginning to wrap up. There is story progression in this issue when it comes to all the little plot points. We get Ghostmaker, interacting with Dark Ivy and trying to save Gotham before Ivy actually destroys it. We see issues with Miracle Molly and Batman confronting the Scarecrow in this issue as well. So there's a lot of things that actually get wrapped up. Jorge Jimenez's artwork is just absolutely outstanding. That's just, again, the one thing that has this book going for it. The facial expressions, the character emotions, they're just so on point. And we did not get a different artist in between the issue this time. It's just we got the same artist and it made it so much better. Now, is this book perfect? No, it's not. It just finally has some story progression where you're like, finally, this is about to end. But you wind up getting to see something very bad happen to the Scarecrow. You wind up getting to see the what happens to Peacekeeper 1 in this issue with him, I guess making his next step forward to where he's just pure crazy and he wants to take over Gotham, right? And then Batman's in the middle of a battle with him. And then at the end of the issue, I think probably the biggest thing is finally we find that Dark Ivy and the missing piece of Ivy are going to come together and they're going to become whole again. So that was really cool. So it looks like everything is going to wrap up in issue 117 and we'll be done with Batman Fear State. The next book we're going to be talking about today is Darkhawk issue 3. This book has been a pleasant surprise. I have not expected Darkhawk to be this well written, and the character development here is absolutely outstanding. Okay, let's check out the artwork in here. Artwork is pretty cool, man. I like the colors in it. I love the way Darkhawk looks when he's like souped up and he's doing fights against these crazy like bad guys. I'm going to show you a page here real quick if I can find it. Like, look at these weird bad guys that he's fighting against. It's just like these B-rated villains, right? But still, nevertheless, it's just an awesome book. And again, I love the character in here by the name of Connor Young, who was a 17-year-old basketball star who had everything going for him. And then all of a sudden, he wound up getting diagnosed with MS, and he loses his basketball scholarship. And all of a sudden, he finds the amulet from Darkhawk, and it gives him these powers of becoming the next Darkhawk, right? His best friend is involved in bad things, and in the previous issue, you wind up seeing him getting killed. And you wind up seeing our main character, Connor, trying to find out where he's at, and then he gets the bad news that he's actually dead. And so he goes investigating around and tries to find out, you know what happened to him, and he finds the people that he's involved with, and he winds up getting into a big battle. And in this issue, you kind of get an understanding of, like, he's trying to figure out how his powers actually work while he's wearing the Darkhawk armor. It was weird how it was explained in the comic book while you're reading it. It's just like, it's in these little panels as you get to see, like, the old Darkhawk showing him that, oh, look, you can burst, ray beams from your chest, or you have claws from your arm, but you only see that in panels like right here, and I just found that was a little bit odd. It's like confusing, especially to a reader that is not familiar with Darkhawk at all. And the one other issue I have with this book, and that's my only gripe about this book, this is the second time this has happened. This happened in the first issue when he went to go get the amulet, and all of a sudden he becomes Darkhawk and destroys all these people. And it happens again in this issue when he's learning his powers, and all of a sudden he gets thrown in a river, somehow he gets his arm chopped off, and then Miles Morales comes out of nowhere and saves the day. And that's what you get in the last issue right here, or last page. So I was like, wow, that's kind of weird. But again, the overall story is quite interesting and I enjoy it. It's just, there's a few little hiccups here and there. So again, I'm very curious to see how this story continues to move forward. I think this is only 5 issues, so that's why maybe they can't really, take too long in the battle scenes and they want to develop the character more. We'll see, but this is still definitely a recommend book. I love this story. Book 5, we're talking about Spawn, issue 323. Spawn has been so good, man. Anything with Spawn is awesome, and the book is cheap. That's what makes it so good. Todd McFarlane can sit there and say, I'm putting out a $3 book, and who cares? But that's not that, man. I mean, he's putting out good quality stuff. The artwork is really good in the book as well. It is done by 2 artists. I prefer the first artist on this book, which is Barberi. But nevertheless, the story was really solid in this issue. Not a lot of action, but when the action scenes do happen in this issue, it's really good, okay? So in this story, we wind up seeing another vampire come because Spawn basically took on a vampire in the last issue that abused this little girl for 4 years, and he basically tortured him, and we wind up showing who's the vampire, who's boss here. Well, you wind up getting one of the head vampire's lackeys come out and say, Spawn, he kind of tries to make a deal with him and says, why don't you join our ranks? We're not part of heaven and we're not part of hell. We're kind of stuck in purgatory, and you've sealed off all the portals so no one can go, but together we can make things work. And Spawn's like, no, and you wind up getting to see this vampire torture Spawn, right? And Spawn is in a very weakened state right now, and Spawn is trying to pull out all the stops to try to stop this vampire. And in the issue, you wind up seeing it. He winds up becoming pretty clever, and he winds up rising the dead from the ground, and rising the dead, and they overtake the vampires. And when the head vampire here is not expecting anything, Spawn sits there and just kills him. And he gives all the other vampires an ultimatum and says, tell your freaking leader that if he wants to make a deal, he needs to come here and talk to me himself. Don't be some wimp and send out your lackey here. Dude, I just thought it was great. But really, again, at the end of the issue, you wind up seeing that Spawn has definitely lost his powers. He's depleted, and the next enemy that he takes on, he doesn't know if he can win. So pretty interesting story. I liked it. I love the battle between Spawn and the vampires. And where this story goes, who knows, man? But all these Spawn stories have been great, and they're definitely a visual treat as well. Book number 6, The Me You Love in the Dark, issue 4. Man, oh man, this book is so freaking good. It just gets better and better as time goes along, right? The artwork in here by Jorge Corona is gorgeous, as always, man. And in this issue, you wind up getting to see a little bit more of the ghost, and you get to see the fear in Ro's eyes. And I love facial expressions in comic books because that tells a story in itself. You can see here, again, the facial expressions, like how angry she's at, and just the word bubbles alone, you can see that she's just, you know, very angry, and she has short patience and stuff like that. But this is a great book. So what happens in this issue is you wind up seeing Ro and the ghost. They hung out, they had sex, they had this relationship, but this ghost, this entity, is very possessive of her and does not want her to leave and won't allow her to leave. Okay? And they get very, I guess, bitter with each other, right? It's just like every little thing is nagging at them, like whether the curtains are up or if they're closed, if they're watching a certain movie or just anything, right? And all Ro wants to do is she just wants time to herself. It's not that she doesn't care about the ghost entity anymore. She just wants to be her own person, and the ghost won't allow it because he's very jealous and very possessive. Then all of a sudden what happens in the issue is we wind up seeing her boss, the person that, you know, that helps support her painting career and puts the paints, you know, the paintings in the shows. He makes his way to the house, and then all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. My God, I can't wait for the next issue here, but this is such a good book, and you can feel the distress on Ro's face, the tension that is going on in this issue. This was definitely the best issue yet. Things are definitely getting dark. I cannot wait to see the conclusion to this. I think maybe 5 is the conclusion, but God, I wish this was a longer series. I love this book, man. So good. Definitely recommend. If you have not picked this up, when the trade comes out, I definitely say read it. You'll probably read it in like 10 minutes. This was a very fast read. Book number 7. This book was another quick read, but it was pretty awesome as we can all relate, right? Especially us people probably in the 30s and the 40s when it comes to playing video games in the arcade. This is the Silver Coin issue 6. My God, this book was so bloody, so gory, so dark. I could see this in an episode of a TV horror series, right? So awesome. So it's about this little boy who is playing this fighting game like Mortal Kombat or whatever the case may be, and he just sucks at the game, right? Artwork is pretty good in this book. There's some dark moments in it as well, but here's some character facial expressions. The kid gets possessed by the game, right? And it just gets super dark, super quick. It's very gory. It's such a good book. Let's see if we get this. Like, he puts some guy's head through the joysticks. It's just so good, man. But let's talk about it a little bit from the beginning. So the kid's a loser. He sucks at the game. They make fun of him. The mall security cop sits there, tosses him out of the arcade because he's like, if you don't have any money, you can't stay here. So what does the kid do? He's in the mall. He finds the silver coin in the fountain, right? And he's like, all right, well, I got my quarter now. And he sticks it in the machine. And right away, he beats the arcade manager, right? And then he winds up, beating the other kids in the arcade. And it's kind of cool because, again, it's like Mortal Kombat, like when it says fatality, it's like slaughtered, and some of the characters in this book are awesome because Spawn makes an appearance in it as a character. And you're like, pretty badass. He's like, slaughtered. And you slowly get to see him changing. Like, he gets sucked into the game, right? One little girl is like, dude, you're awesome, but maybe you should take a break. And then you can wind up getting to see like his eyes change, and he shoves the arcade manager's freaking head through the joysticks, and then he pulls the joystick out and winds up becoming like a freaking like a staff or whatever, and he kills the security guy, chops off his freaking arms and stuff. It's so sick. Like, look at this page right here. Dude, that's intense, bro. I was like, this book is intense, right? And then all of a sudden he's playing forever, and it's the next morning, and the kids are like, oh, where's that kid? Oh, he took off. And like everything was like covered up, like all the blood, the body, everything was there, and just like the kids are there playing the game once again. They're like, ooh, check out the high score, right? And then they realize that the kid is like part of the game now, like he's integrated in the game, which was interesting. But if you look again at the characters in there, you wind up seeing Spawn in there, and then you wind up seeing the lady with the red dress was in there. She makes a cameo in there. So yeah, dude, it's just a great book overall. Just a lot of fun. Doesn't take a lot of time to read. I wanted to read more. That's why I wanted a part 2. I wanted something else. Like, I wanted him to like kill all the kids, or I don't know. I just wanted something deeper, darker. I wanted the story to keep going. And that's when you really enjoy a comic, right? Book number 8. Now we're getting to all the new number 1s that came out this week that I bought. And this one goes to Chip Zdarsky's New Burn. This was a quite interesting book. I wasn't going to pick this up as I'm not a huge investigation detective type of guy. Sometimes these types of things like lose me in a comic book if I'm not paying attention closely, because you really got to pay attention to those fine, minute details. And I'll be honest, sometimes when you're a comic book reviewer on YouTube and you read like 15, 20 books a week, or even more than that at times, sometimes you tend to forget certain little things that happen in a comic book, or you overlook them or whatnot. But never the case, this book was actually quite interesting. I enjoyed it. This is the artwork. This is the way it looks like. It kind of reminds me of like I can't quite make out what I'm trying to say, but it definitely gives me like a detective, crime, I don't know, Law and Order vibe when I read this book, right? I thought it was actually kind of cool. So what is this about? So it's about this detective who works for the mafia, and he used to be a cop. And when he was a cop, he was a good cop. But then when he retired, he needed to make income. So when somebody dies from a particular gang, they call him up and they're like, dude, you got to figure this out for us. And he's like, okay. And if another person comes, it's like, yo, you got to figure this out. And if you mess with this guy, if you kill this guy, it doesn't matter what gang it is. It's like they'll kill that person that killed the detective. Quite interesting, right? So it's this murder that happened that was attached to one of the crime organizations that had to deal with, cocaine and all this different type of stuff. And you wind up getting to see the mind of Newburn on how he figures out the crime, which was quite interesting. And by the time you wind up getting to the end of the issue, you go through all the steps, and he is a complete badass. I mean, by reading this book, it makes me feel like Chip Zdarsky should be like a detective, because the way he came out with this, the way he wrote this was amazing. I really enjoyed this book. This is definitely a must read. I can't really explain to you everything that happens in this book. But all as I can say is that it's good. And if you like detective comics, like not detective comic book, but if you like an investigation type of comic like CSI or Law and Order, trying to solve murder mysteries, this is something that you might enjoy. So I liked it. I say definitely pick this one up. Can't wait for issue 2. Book number 9, probably the biggest DC book, if not the biggest comic book release when it comes to maybe the big 3. This comes to Dark Knights of Steel. This is issue 1 of 12. The artwork was pretty good in this book. I thought it was really good in the beginning, but as time went along, I thought it got a little bit, I don't know, a little bit sketchy, maybe a little weird in the faces and whatnot. But nevertheless, it was a pretty good read. I actually enjoyed it. Seeing our superheroes in medieval times, right? That's just something that you don't see. This book is written by Tom Taylor, and it starts off almost very similar to every Superman freaking book. If you haven't figured out where Superman comes from, what his origin tale, right? Krypton blows up, the ship goes to Earth. But it's not who you think it is. It's you wind up seeing the parents wind up landing on Earth during medieval times while Superman's mom is basically in labor about to give birth. And that was kind of cool little twist right there. They're being attacked by knights, and then what happens is you see Superman's dad stops all the knights, and you wind up seeing 19 years later, right? So that was kind of cool how our superheroes live in this world today. And we wind up finding out that our heroes have to go after a banshee, and the banshee is Dinah, which is Black Canary, and they capture her. And there's kind of this rift between Batman and Superman, which is always to be expected. They have different views on things, which is nothing, like I said, different, right? But the interesting twist of this book is that you wind up seeing that Batman is not just Batman. He's something else. And you wind up seeing a murder happen at the end of this book. I'm not going to spoil everything because I want you to get the full effect of it. But it was a quite interesting story. I really enjoyed it. And seeing all the different characters in this medieval period was kind of cool too. Like, you got to see the Robins, how they interacted with Batman, and Batman being like a prince, and just all kinds of cool things, right? But yeah, there's this twist going on with Batman. And by the time you get to the end of this issue, you will see what that twist is, and you'll realize what it's about. Pretty cool book, man. I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't say that it surprised me as much as, say, some other books that Tom Taylor has written, but it still was really good, and this has a lot of strong potential. I definitely say pick this book up. And the final book I'll be talking about today, book number 10, goes to Knighted, issue 1 of 5. This is a mini series, but I'm sure if this does well, they'll come out with a volume 2, written by Craig Hurwitz and Mark Texeira. Here is the artwork before we get into the story. Now, I had high hopes from this book right from the start because I read the synopsis about the book and I was like, wow, this sounds like it's a lot of fun, right? So here's some of the interior artwork, the way the characters' faces look, their facial expressions as well. We get to see some fight scenes in here between the normal everyday civilians in here and people with some meta powers and whatnot. So the artwork I thought at times was good, and at times it could have been better. It was a little bit dark, and that's always been my gripe when it comes to these AWA books. They seem a little bit dark, but check this out right here. That's a pretty cool 2-page spread. So let's get into this story. What is Knighted, right? So I wanted people to let them know that this cover is not actually just a gimmick cover. What happens on this cover, or basically what you see here, is what you basically get in the comic book. You wind up getting this guy by the name of Bob, who's some computer investigating person, whatever it is. I forgot the term for it, right? And he's just your everyday average Joe Schmo. And this character is more like a Peter Parker type of character, right? He asks the hot girl to marry him, and she says no, because she's like expecting more from him out of his career and his life and things like that. And that's how the book starts. It's like that Peter Parker look, and you're like, dude, this guy's having a bad day, right? He gets beat up in the parking lot. The freaking ring wound up getting stolen, and you wind up going, seeing how his job works and whatnot. And so then he winds up leaving, trying to go on the way home. And then what happens on the way home, he notices that these gas lines were all bent up and they're about to collapse. And if that happens, that there's something bad's going to happen to this building. So he goes in and he unties these ropes, right? And then what happens is that the Knight character, who is a like ripoff off of Batman, winds up falling and dying. Why he was up as high as he was is because he's a peeping Tom. He's a perv. He's checking out all these chicks out here, you know, and he winds up splatting and he's dead. And the dude picks him up and he's like, oh my God, this is the Knight. Like, what am I going to do with him, right? And so all of a sudden, like, his bat freaking Ferrari or Lambo comes out and it picks him up and it takes him to, like, the freaking Bat Cave or whatever it is that you want to call it, while the body is, like, moving around and stuff. And it takes it to the Batcave, the headquarters, right? And you get to see all the vehicles and all the weapons. And you notice that the colors here are like red and black. And I'll explain my theory here in a minute. And you go to the butler, right? And the butler is like Morgan Freeman. So right away you see him and he's like, oh yeah, that's how Morgan Freeman looks like. And you're like, that's his voice in your head, right? And he explains to him, he's like, dude, I just like, I didn't know what was going on and I accidentally killed him. And the butler's like, oh, thank God he's dead because he's such an asshole. So it's so funny. And basically what happens is our hero here, he becomes our main character. He becomes the new hero. He becomes the new Knight, right? Because listen, no matter any way you want to look at it, he actually killed the guy, even though it was on accident. So the next best thing was for him to take over the mantle, and now he has to train to become the next Batman-like character. Now, what I liked about this book is that, yes, it is like Batman, but in many ways it's like Spider-Man. So it's like Spider-Man and Batman combined, right? The red and black, the red represents Spider-Man, the black represents Batman. The main character is like Peter Parker, but he has all the toys of Bruce Wayne, which I thought was really cool. I really enjoyed this book. It's a lot of fun. I definitely say recommend it. Artwork, again, wasn't at my strong point. There was some cheesy lines, a little too much dialogue. There was a lot of explanation of what's going on in the AWA universe when it comes to the Resistance and stuff like that. But you don't need to read that to really understand. I think that's why they inserted it in here. But this is a fun book. I definitely recommend this book. I can't wait to see the adventures of our hero Bob and where he goes and how he learns the rope of how to be the next Knight, you know? Cool book, dude. Really sweet. And there is another episode of After the Pull. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I want to know in the comments below, are there any books that you're going to go out and buy now that I mentioned in this video? And is there any books that you guys want to recommend to me? Also leave that in the comments below. And as always, guys, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss any content from me. And speaking of content, if you missed my 500th comic book haul, I'll leave you more content right here to check out on top of that video. And as always, guys, keep buying, keep collecting, and most importantly, never forget to read your comics. So until that next video, I'll see you real soon, guys. Take care. Bye.